Hello, hello. Thank you for being here with me. Today I'm sharing vocal readings and my synthesis of focus topics from book 48 in my Book a Week series, Alan Watts' The Joyous Cosmology. The most rampant false belief is something that most of us are suffering from. The idea and accompanying sensation that we are alone and isolated in what Alan Watts referred to as our skin-encapsulated egos. And there are many other false beliefs that become possible due to this foundational false belief. Consider these with me. Our tendency to feel competitive toward other human beings. The extent to which we feel that we could have any ownership over things, people, the earth. Our enchantment with symbols for reality and accompanying hallucination that the symbols have more value than the reality that they represent. For instance, money and digits in a bank account being more valuable than true prosperity. And the emerging epidemic that I've noticed of valuing the appearance of being happy over the experience of being happy. Let's consider everything that we've been taught about the world and about ourselves, and then take it a step further and consider what may have motivated our teachers to teach us what they did. Some may have taught us mechanically, simply passing on to us what they had already accepted as real. Some may have taught us whatever they needed to in order to incentivize us to behave in a way that would ensure our survival and ensure our alignment with what society would call productive. So now, today, we have the privilege of asking ourselves, was it true? Everything I was conditioned to believe, is it true? Much of it may be indeed true. In regard to the things that we suspect may not be, we now get to open the door into everything that implies, mysterious as it may be. Alan Watts, in his uniquely poetic style, opens an understanding of what our senses can register when the many layers of thought form that we are conditioned to rely upon are removed, stripping away our false beliefs and all the noisy messaging that they communicate via thought form. What might we find? It is exciting to consider what is beyond our knowledge, and ever more exciting to begin to feel it. Without further ado, I'll move on toward the vocal readings from this wonderful book. Enjoy. The Joyous Cosmology, Adventures in the Chemistry of Consciousness. Page 7. The individual is so interwoven with the universe that he and it are one body. This is a point of view which, unlike some other forms of mysticism, does not deny physical distinctions but sees them as the plain expression of unity. As one sees so clearly in Chinese painting, the individual tree or rock is not on but with the space that forms its background. The paper untouched by the brush is an integral part of the picture and never mere backing. It is for this reason that when a Zen master is asked about the universal or the ultimate, he replies with the immediate and particular, the cypress tree in the yard. Here then, we have what Robert Linson has called a spiritual materialism, a standpoint far closer to relativity and field theory in modern science than to any religious supernaturalism. But whereas the scientific comprehension of the relative universe is as yet largely theoretical, these Eastern disciplines have made it a direct experience. Potentially, then, they would seem to offer a marvelous parallel to Western science. Page 31. Sometimes the image of the physical world is not so much a dance of gestures as a woven texture light, sound, touch, taste, and smell become a continuous warp, with the feeling that the whole dimension of sensation is a single continuum or field. Crossing the warp is a woof, representing the dimension of meaning, moral and aesthetic values, personal or individual uniqueness, logical significance, and expressive form. And the two dimensions interpenetrate so as to make distinguishable shapes seem like ripples in the water of sensation. The warp and the woof stream together, for the weaving is neither flat nor static, but a many-direction cross-flow of impulses, filling the whole volume of space. I feel that the world is on something in somewhat the same way that a color photograph is on a film, underlying and connecting the patches of color, though the film here is a dense rain of energy. I see that what it is on is my brain, that enchanted loom, as Sherrington called it. Brain and world, warp of sense and woof of meaning, seem to interpenetrate inseparably. They hold their boundaries or limits in common in such a way as to define one another and to be impossible without each other. Page 48. Dualities and opposites are not disjoined but polar. They do not encounter and confront one another from afar. They exfoliate from a common center. Ordinary thinking conceals polarity and relativity because it employs terms, the terminals or ends, the poles, neglecting what lies between them. The difference of front and back, to be and not to be, hides their unity and mutuality. I'm on page 67, and I'll preview this reading by saying that this passage is one of the most moving pieces of poetry I've encountered. I feel with a peace so deep that it sings to be shared with all the world, that at last I belong, that I've returned to the home behind home, that I've come into the inheritance unknowingly bequeathed from all my ancestors since the beginning. Plucked like the strings of a harp, the warp and woof of the world reverberate with memories of triumphant hymns. The sure foundation upon which I had sought to stand has turned out to be the center from which I seek. The elusive substance beneath all the forms of the universe is discovered as the immediate gesture of my hand. But how did I ever get lost? And why have I traveled so far through these intertwined tunnels that I seem to be the quaking vortex of defended defensiveness, which is my conventional self? I'm on page 81. The passage I'm going to read begins as a description of the insights that can be facilitated through the use of consciousness-changing drugs featured in this book. Then it moves into a commentary about that. The moment of the world's creation is seen to lie not in some unthinkably remote past, but in the eternal now. And similarly, the play of life is at first apprehended rather cynically, as an extremely intricate contest in one-upmanship, expressing itself deviously even in the most altruistic of human endeavors. Later, one begins to feel a good old rascal attitude toward the system. Humor gets the better of cynicism. But finally, rapacious and all-embracing cosmic selfishness turns out to be a disguise for the unmotivated play of love. But I do not mean to generalize. I'm speaking only of what I've experienced for myself, and I wish to repeat that drugs of this kind are in no sense bottled and predigested wisdom. I feel that had I no skill as a writer or philosopher, drugs which dissolve some of the barriers between ordinary pedestrian consciousness and the multidimensional superconsciousness of the organism would bring little but delightful or sometimes terrifying confusion. I'm not saying that only intellectuals can benefit from them, but that there must be sufficient discipline or insight to relate this expanded consciousness to our normal everyday life. Page 101. Only those who have cultivated the art of living completely in the present have any use for making plans for the future. For when the plans mature, they will be able to enjoy the results. Tomorrow never comes. I have never yet heard a preacher urging his congregation to practice this section of the Sermon on the Mount, which begins, "Be not anxious for the morrow." The truth is that people who live for the future are, as we say of the insane, not quite all there or here. By over-eagerness, they are perpetually missing the point. Foresight is bought at the price of anxiety, and when overused, it destroys all its own advantages. Page 104. The I feeling, to be felt at all, must always be a sensation relative to the other, to something beyond its control and experience. To be at all, it must begin and end. But the intellectual jump, which mystical and psychedelic experiences make here, is in enabling you to see that all these myriad I centers are yourself, not indeed your personal and superficially conscious ego, but what Hindus call the Paramatman, the self of all selves. As the retina enables us to see countless pulses of energy as a single light, so the mystical experience shows us innumerable individuals as a single self.